Hi everyone! With the school year starting again, I wanted to share my own experience taking chemistry back when I was in high school. For some background, I did a lot of studying and self-teaching on my own, and today I'll be showing not only how to study chemistry, but how to learn chemistry from step 1. This video will be broken down into 3 parts: what to do before class, during class, and after class. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Part 1. Before class. I think that the most important part of learning chemistry is actually staying one step ahead. And what I mean by this is that you want to walk into class having a good foundation and basic knowledge about what's going to be taught. It doesn't mean that you have to spend 2 or 3 hours studying beforehand. What I basically did is I used a lot of online resources on YouTube. You just have to preview the material before class. And the 2 main YouTube channels I used was Organic Chemistry Tutor and Khan Academy. So I really liked Organic Chemistry Tutor because he had a combination of both long and short videos. I also really like how he works through multiple practice problems during his videos. That way you have an idea of how to apply the information you're learning into questions that you might be facing when you're taking your exam. Organic Chemistry Tutor is also very repetitive with explaining, so that's great for previewing and learning the information for the first time. Khan Academy is also a great resource to be using when you're trying to preview information before class. Khan Academy's videos are much more polished in comparison to Organic Chemistry Tutor, so this just really depends on what you prefer. Khan Academy also does a great job explaining concepts, and he does have practice questions embedded throughout the video, but I personally felt that Organic Chemistry Tutor had much more, and that's what I needed. His videos were really long, so what I would do is just pick one video that covered the entire concept. For example, say electrochemistry. There are some videos that are almost an hour long, and it was great for me because I would listen to the video while commuting to school. I wouldn't have to watch multiple short videos because all the information was in that long video, and it was a good summary and introduction to the material that I would be learning in class. All the information that I needed for my purposes would be in that one video. This meant that during my commute, if I ever got distracted, I wouldn't have to replay the video back a couple of minutes. I could just keep on watching because more cases than not, he would most likely repeat what he was talking about. He's very repetitive, and that's really helpful in drilling in the information. Of course, I'm not saying that Khan Academy isn't good. Organic Chemistry Tutor is just what I preferred. I found that Khan Academy's videos were a bit more deeper, and that wasn't what I needed if I wanted just a rough preview of the information. Beyond YouTube channels, it's also great to actually read the textbook. So this probably sounds like a lot of work, but it's actually not that bad because I would only read the textbook if there was some material that I was still a bit confused about. I personally highly recommend the Brown-LeMay textbook. It doesn't really matter which edition or version you're using, just having a textbook explains a lot of concepts much more deeper. And if you're confused about, say, orbitals and molecular geometry, Brown-LeMay had really great graphics and images for helping me understand how orbitals worked. During the middle of junior year, I was also studying for Chemistry Olympiad, and I heavily relied on a Brown-LeMay textbook because it was just so comprehensive. I didn't have a teacher to explain to me the nitty-gritty bits of how an orbital works, so I turned to the Brown-LeMay textbook. Even if I didn't fully understand the concept, I would read through the textbook, and having the exposure and also just trying to memorize the facts first before piecing everything together was really helpful for me. So by the time that I was actually learning the material in class later on in the year, I picked up concepts very quickly because I had that background and foundation in the concept. So I know that doing all this extra preparation may feel like a lot of extra work, which is why it's very important for you to find what works for you. I personally managed to read a bit of the textbook and also use Organic Chemistry Tutor, but that doesn't mean that you also have to read the textbook. You can just rely solely on Khan Academy or Organic Chemistry Tutor, or even any other chemistry channel on YouTube. In general, you want to minimize effort and reduce friction. For me, this was watching videos on my commute to school. It took me around 40 to 50 minutes to get to school every morning, so during that time, it was basically like dead space. I couldn't really write. I wasn't the type to like be furiously writing essays in the car ride to school because I couldn't really concentrate like that, and that would take more brain power. But just watching a YouTube video made by organic chemistry tutor, I had that mental capacity and concentration to do it in the morning. So that's what I did. I would play one of the videos and just put in my headphones, and as I was in the car, I would just listen to chemistry videos instead of listening to music. I would force myself to either watch or listen to one video every day, and because I knew I would be really tired after a long day of school, I would force myself to watch that video in the morning. My reward was knowing that I could listen to music and blast it on the speakers on my way home without feeling guilty about not learning a bit of chemistry that day. And it really adds up to do a bit day by day. You don't have to do a full hour. You can do 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the video. You can even do 10 or 15 minutes. As long as you do a bit of it every single day, it seriously adds up. And that 10 or 15 minutes is actually not that painful, because I personally found chemistry really interesting. And as I did this preparation, I got better at chemistry, and I became more interested in chemistry because I was better at it. Additionally, you can minimize effort and reduce friction by not having a strict schedule. I didn't have to think about, oh, I need to watch video A, B, and C on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Having to think about which videos you need to watch every day just adds a lot more friction between you and watching the video. So I just did whatever I wanted. I did whatever came easiest for me, and I highly recommend that you guys don't over plan and schedule everything. Just go on YouTube, look up whichever channel you want to use, and just type in the topic that you're going to be learning that week, and just click on that first video. If I had 20 minutes in the car and I found a video that was 60 minutes, I'll just watch the first 20 minutes. It's fine. I don't have to force myself to go find a video that's only 20 minutes, so I would finish the video in the time that I had. I also didn't have a strict schedule for watching videos. I didn't have to think about, oh, I'm gonna be learning about X topic tomorrow, so I need to watch a video about that topic today. I just clicked on a random video that was generally stuff I haven't learned about, and I would watch it, and that's that. That really just helped eliminate the friction and effort I would have to put into previewing material, and it made me more inclined to actually do this. And finally, to also motivate yourself into doing this extra work beforehand, understand why you're doing this. Basically, this comes down to 3 things. Number 1, you want to be absorbing information easier. If you already have a good background on the topic, by the time you're going to class, this is the second time you're being exposed to the topic, and you can pick up the information a lot quicker. Just do this once and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Another benefit to coming to class prepared is that you can actually ask deeper questions. I found that before I did this of previewing information before I went to class, I would often go to class and I would just be rapidly taking notes, and I wasn't really comprehending the material that I was learning. So even if I didn't know something, I didn't know that I didn't know that topic until I was home studying. I would be home studying and I'm like, wait, this actually doesn't really make that much sense. And then I would have to wait until the next time I saw my chem teacher to ask him. But if you come to class prepared, you have a general idea of what you're going to be learning and you have a good foundation. And once you learn the material, you're much more likely to pick out things that you don't understand because you've already been exposed to these concepts. And thus, you can ask deeper questions in class and get the answer to your questions at that time. You can also go in with questions that you might have had when you were preparing and previewing this content. The third benefit to previewing material is that this helps consolidate your memory, because there's actually time in between their first exposure to the information and your second exposure. The in-class learning you have is actually going to be a nice review for you because you already have a general idea of what's being taught. Previewing information is similar to doing spaced repetitions, and studies have shown how spaced repetitions really helps you retain what you learn. There's a huge science behind this, so let me know down in the comments if you want to know more about spaced repetition and also active recall, which is another really helpful study technique, and how I use these 2 techniques in med school. Now let's move forwards to part 2. What to do during class. There's basically 2 things that you should be doing in class. You should be taking notes and asking questions. This might sound really simple, but hear me out. I highly recommend that you take notes in high school because you need a primary source of information to study with. Videos, textbooks, etc. are all secondary sources of information, but because your teacher is usually the one who's writing the exams, you want to be taking notes on what he or she is teaching. I found that before I started previewing information, I used to take copious amounts of notes, and I would write down every single thing that the teacher said because I didn't want to be missing out on anything. I had basically major FOMO. This is not necessarily bad because you have a solid stack of notes to study from during exam season, but it can get really overwhelming, and more importantly, you're getting distracted. So I find that the most important part of learning chemistry is actually understanding the main concept. When you're taking notes, you start getting distracted by all the details and you're not actually consolidating and understanding the information. You're just writing everything down brainlessly. This was exactly how I worked in class before I previewed information, and this is also what a lot of my classmates did. So I still did fine on exams, but it required a lot more studying afterwards. I would look through my notes and I'm like, what did I mean by this? Because I was trying to write so quickly. And overall, this wasn't the smartest way to learn. I also had a weaker grasp on the big concept, and my memory wasn't that good. So even though I could cram for an exam right beforehand, I didn't necessarily retain the information that I learned because I didn't fully understand the concept. After I started previewing material before going to class, I toned down the frantic note-taking part of me, and I just sat back a lot to just listen during class. I could afford to take minimal notes because I already had some understanding of the information before class. The extent of note-taking you do in class depends on the amount of preparation you did beforehand. Because I did Chemistry Olympiad and I took the AP Chem exam in junior year, I roughly learned the concepts once already. So going to class, especially in senior year, served more to remind me of things that I learned but didn't completely understand, or concepts that I may have forgotten. So don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you to learn the entire syllabus of chemistry before you even attend class. But I'm just saying that this is what happened in my case, and it really helped me understand how important it is to preview information before you hold class. I still took notes in senior years because the AP and IB syllabus does not completely overlap, but the amount of notes that I took was drastically reduced, especially compared to my classmates that didn't study for the AP chemistry exam in junior year. Going into class with some prior knowledge of the topic that is going to be taught is so helpful. And even if you only watch one video by organic chemistry tutor and you still don't fully understand the concept, it's still really helpful because by the time you're in class, sitting in your seat, learning the material from your teacher, you'll be thinking, oh, I remember this, and it will be much quicker for you to pick up concepts compared to if you walked into class as a completely blank slate. Now that I'm done with talking about taking notes in class, the second thing you should also actively do in class is ask questions. This might sound like a no-brainer, but I do know that asking questions can be scary because of X, Y, and Z factors. You might be scared of sounding stupid, and you don't want your classmates to judge you. You don't want your teacher to judge you. But honestly, at the end of the day, do what helps you learn the most. And for me, asking questions was so important. Because once I ask the question, whether it's a really dumb question or not, I will always remember the answer that I got from the teacher, and that would also come back to help me for exams. There has been multiple times where I've asked the question in class, and originally I thought it was a dumb question. But after getting the answer and after fully understanding the concept, I would see that question pop up on an exam. And I was so glad that I personally asked the question. There's a difference to you asking questions compared to someone else asking questions. Because when you're the one who's asking questions, you're much more likely to remember the answer. You might remember a friend asking a question, but you might not remember the answer because maybe you weren't paying attention enough. But if you're the one who's asking questions, you will most definitely pay attention to the answer that you get from your teacher. I strongly believe that if I make a mistake, I will not make the same mistake again. And I'd rather make that mistake in class and ask a question about it than to make the question on the exam when it actually counts for a grade and there's no one there to help me. Now, finally, Beyond taking notes and asking questions, you should ultimately prioritize understanding the why in chemistry. I really like chemistry because chemistry is like math. Many topics are very logical and interconnected. It builds on top of each other. And even if you don't understand the final concept, if you have a good foundation, you can actually often theorize or kind of derive the information in a topic from your basic understanding and from the basic fundamentals. One example are orbitals and molecular geometry. Take, for example, CH4 compared to NH3. CH4 has a tetrahedral shape, while NH3 has a trigonal pyramidal shape. Now you can draw the Lewis structure and you will see that they both have 4 electron pairs, but the difference is that ammonia, NH3, has 1 lone pair. You can obviously memorize the corresponding shapes to the different numbers of shared and unshared pairs, but I think it's also very important to take the time to understand why having a lone pair results in that specific shape. I find that learning the why behind concepts is a much better way of studying. This is especially because sometimes your memory will fail you. If you suddenly blank on a question asking about molecular geometry, but you can understand and visualize how the orbitals for that molecule will work, you can figure out the answer and derive that answer even though you forgot the corresponding molecular geometry for that number of lone pairs. So let's just quickly recap what you should be doing during class. You should be taking good notes, and you should also be asking deep questions for the ultimate goal of understanding the why behind various chem topics. Let's move on to what you should be doing after class. There were 3 main things I would mainly do after class: worksheets, look at visuals from secondary sources, and make cram cards. So chem worksheets are a pain, but they get the job done. Rereading and understanding the information is not going to be enough if you don't know how to apply the information, and that's what doing practice worksheets helps you with. It really drills in the information, and there's no way of getting out of doing practice worksheets. Just accept that fate and get started early. Seeing how practice questions are solved from YouTube videos is very different from actually doing it yourself. You might see Khan Academy solving out a question and you'll think to yourself, oh, I understand that. But if you actually sit down and force yourself to do it, it's a different experience. Additionally, the more you see, the easier it gets. Usually, I have found that the questions that show up on exams, I've usually done a very similar, if not the same question from the practice worksheet. So it's really helpful for you to just do lots of practice worksheets if you have the time, until you fully grasp the information. The second thing you should also do after class is to look at a lot of visuals. Being able to see an image of the molecular structure of a molecule or a good diagram of a galvanic cell is so helpful for helping me memorize this stuff. Browse through a lot of different images because some images of orbitals just look better and will help you understand better compared to other images. When I was studying for electrochemistry, drawing out the diagrams for the galvanic cell versus the electrolytic cell was so helpful. I would label out the flow of electrons, the different anions and cations that would be in the solution, and also the charges of the anode and cathode, because that was something that was very confusing for me, and it took me a while to get straight which was negative and which was positive for the galvanic and electrolytic cell. Drawing this out and just copying one of the images that I found within the Brown LeMay textbook was really helpful in helping me memorize this. So by the time that I sat down to take the exam, I could just visualize the image that I copied down countless times in my head, and I would be able to answer the questions that I faced on the test. Beyond doing practice worksheets and looking at diagrams, I also really like making cram cards. Basically, this is again consolidating the information to help you better review the material. I would take a small index card and I would put all my notes in there, but I would only put the bare essentials. And doing that really helped me memorize the concepts, and it was also really useful for me to study, say during lunch. I would just leave the index cards in my lunchbox, and after I finished up my lunch, I would just take those index cards out instead of having to rummage through my backpack to grab my notes. I would look at the index card and I would just quickly read through it in order to review before a test or an exam. I did something very similar for learning Spanish tenses and conjugations, and if you want a more in-depth video on how I made cram cards for various different subjects, let me know down in the comments below and I'll make a video for that. Finally, as you're doing all this preparation and studying after class, make sure that you also make note of what you mess up. When you're making corrections for your practice worksheets, write down what you got wrong and understand why you got it wrong. Back when I was studying for the AP Chemistry exam, I would do corrections for my FRQs, and I really took the time to understand what I got wrong. And I would go back to my notes or go back to the textbook to kind of relearn the concept, refresh my memory to ensure that I wouldn't make the same mistake. This is something you should be doing when you're studying for an exam after going to class. You need to not just make corrections and be like, oh, I got that wrong. I'll just remember to do it next time. Actually put in the effort to review the material to make sure that you don't make the same mistake. So again, there's 3 main things that I mainly did after class to really help me learn and memorize chemistry. I was doing practice worksheets to drill in the information, using visuals and copying those to help me memorize and visualize it for the exam, and also using cram cards, which were convenient and easy study tools that I would use during the spare time I had during school. So that's it for this video. There were basically 3 parts to my process of learning and studying for chemistry. There was previewing the information. During class, I would take notes and ask lots of questions, and afterwards, I would use worksheets, look at pictures, and also make cram cards. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, comment down below what you want to see next from me, and make sure you also hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching!